What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Today I'm going to be bringing you chapter 1 of Shaman King Flowers entitled Tsubomi, which in English translates to flower bud, and that makes sense given the fact that this is Shaman King Flowers. Alright, so a lot of you know that I've been tracking this series for a long time, been, patiently waiting and anticipating its release. And now that it's here, of course, this chapter review is a little bit late, but I know a lot of you have been, asking me about this. And so here it is. And I have to say, this chapter, wow, it was definitely worth the wait, especially for the plot twist at the end was just ridiculous. First thing I want to touch on, though, is aesthetics and character design. And so since I've been following Shaman King, not just the original Shaman King series, but Shaman King Zero, the prequel chapters as well, and now having read through this chapter, my thoughts on Takei's artwork has sort of evolved over time. And one of the things that I noticed, but that I didn't really say explicitly, is that Takei is definitely a minimalist when it comes to artwork. He uses the minimum amount of lines necessary to draw something. And I mean, his art style, his artwork just doesn't have that sort of flourish, that dynamism that for example Oda's artwork has. And again, Takei just seems to be just really committed to this idea of minimalism. His artwork in comparison to other mangakas, and I guess in some respects this his artwork sort of reminds me of Togashi's artwork as well, where the artwork just seems skeletal. Like you just have, like I said, the minimal amount of lines necessary. There's nothing flashy, very cleanly drawn. He doesn't overuse, shading, for example, and the artwork, tends to be very bright, very cleanly drawn, but again, very, very skeletal. Now, I'm not saying that this is bad, but on the other hand, it's not super impressive either. I mean, it's just, again, it just seems, like his artwork is just this sort of skeletal framework that he has. And I think that, I don't know, for me at least, and in my opinion, I think that his artwork just lacks a certain flourish. It just, I don't know, it just lacks a certain style. And I just want to see more of his how he's progressed as an artist, because it seems like Shaman King Flowers as compared to Shaman King the original series. I haven't read Shaman King in about 3 years. Yes, it's been 3 years, but I remember the artwork in Shaman King being better, and that's just me. In terms of character designs, first we on the cover page we have Hana and we have Anna. Anna, by the way, is, for those of you who don't know, is Silver's daughter, and he named her after, obviously, Anna, who turned out to be Yo's wife. So Anna is wearing a red scarf. Um, she's wearing a forest green. No, wait, not a red scarf. She's wearing a red headscarf. Then she has on a forest green one-piece skirt with knee-high white boots. I'm sorry, Takei, but that girl is not matching. I'm just saying. She's not matching. Her character looks okay, but I think you should have gave her something else to wear. And even though we we're not going to be able to see the colors because this is going to be black and white, still, man, that just, the character design's a little bit off, but whatever. And Hannah looks, and somebody else mentioned that Takei's, that the characters in Takei's artwork, especially in the Shaman King Zero chapters, he had a lot of characters who looked exactly alike, but in Shaman King Flowers, it actually doesn't look like Hana um, resembles Yo all that much. He does resemble in him in terms of his body structure. He still's very, very skinny, just like Yo was. His clothes, he looks like he's wearing the same sort of clothes that sort of I don't know how to describe it. That dress shirt that doesn't have buttons. I guess you could describe it that way with the pants. And I believe he has cuffs just like Yo does, man. Takei, man, cuffs have been played out for like I don't know, man, but they've been played out for a long ass for a long ass time, man. But yeah, so Hana doesn't actually resemble Yo, but just in terms of his body structure and the clothes that he wears, he does. So now let me get to my summary and analysis of this opening chapter. All right, so in the opening scene, we see Hana sitting under a cherry blossom tree in the middle of a cemetery, and Amidamaru's also there with him. And for those of you who know about, cherry blossom trees and their importance in terms of Japanese culture, cherry blossom trees are extremely important symbolism in Japanese culture. They generally symbolize or represent mortality, the ephemerality of life, sort of the transient nature of life. And it's also connected to the idea that even though life is sort of, short-lived or sort of transient, that there's still a sort of blissful sadness in living out one's life. And obviously that comes through because of the fact that Hana is a shaman and he's, sitting in a cemetery and he's one of and his companion happens to be a dead spirit, Amidamaru. So, that symbolism is going to be very important for, not just this chapter, but probably for the rest of the series as well. And I think um, this symbolism is also going to be connected to Hana's, characterization, because a lot of the ephemerality of life and the transience of life has to do with, Hana's relationship with his father, or rather lack thereof, because I'm actually not sure if Yo is ever going to appear in this series. I don't think that he will, in fact. And so a lot of that cherry blossom symbolism has a lot to do with Hannah's characterization in terms of, his lack of relationship with his father. As the chapter goes on, we immediately see that, Hannah is not like Yo at all. Some gang members appear in the cemetery. A lot of gang members, actually, about maybe 15 to 20. They appear in the cemetery. They challenge him to a fight. And apparently, he's been getting in a lot of fights with local gang members. And it appears that he's very impulsive, very hot headed, and he does not at all display any of the prudence that was so characteristic of Yo, because Yo was always so calm, so laid back. He tried to avoid conflict, but it doesn't seem like Hana has, inherited any of those character traits. And like I alluded to before, Hana has inherited Amidamaru. And so right before, Amidamaru materializes, and I believe this is the first incarnation of the Oversoul. I don't quite remember how that goes, but if I remember correctly, the materialization of the spirit companion is the first incarnation of the Oversoul. And we see that Hana is extremely powerful. And it looks like the rumors that he was, stronger than Yo are correct, because at this point in, like, when we saw Yo in chapter 1, if we would compare him to Hana in, the chapter 1 of Shaman King Flowers, Hana is clearly more powerful than Yo was at this point in time. And he even, like, as he's about to engage in this fight with the gang members, he tells Amidamaru, like, don't hold back. There's no point in holding back. And so he also seems to have a self-confidence in his own ability and a sort of assuredness in his own ability that Yo didn't have at this point in time either. But like I said, he's radiating power. He's telling Amidamaru not to hold back. And one of the things that I noticed is that I won't say that Hana is crazy or insane with power, but there's some indications that he might be a little bit off kilter, and that's just because of his facial expressions and the way he seems to relish combat in a way that Yo didn't relish combat, and he seems to really enjoy, really thrive on this idea of using his power. And so he seems a little bit off kilter, and maybe this is some sort of setup in his characterization where it could turn out that Hana could be a much more dark character than Yo was. Not sure about that, but it certainly seems like that's a possibility. And So after, basically there's a skip. We don't get to see this fight scene, but apparently, it's alluded to that Hana basically beats up all of these gang members, about 20 of them. And then after that, he goes home and we get introduced to Tamao. And Tamao, um, is her job is to watch over Hana. I wouldn't call her a babysitter, but that's kind of like what she is. Her job is to basically make sure Hana doesn't get into any trouble by using his shaman powers, to make sure Hana, takes up his responsibility to look over and oversee the Asakura family until the next shaman king fight. So that's basically what Tamao is there for. She's, his babysitter. I guess you could call it that. Um, and after this, of course, she, scolds Hana for getting into fights, and she recognizes that he's been, using his power again. And after this scene, Hana goes up to his bedroom with Amidamaru, and there's a very, very interesting conversation, which is going to serve as the foundation for Hana's characterization for the rest of this series. This is just an extremely important conversation between Amidamaru and Hana. So Amidamaru, as they, settle down, they get into Hana's room. One of the things that Amidamaru says is that he tries to warn Hana about the way that he's using his powers. And Amidamaru, comes right out and he says, listen, I understand that I'm your spirit companion, and so I have some responsibility to obey you. But I'd rather that you not use me in this sort of way. Use me as a weapon to, beat up local gang members. And not Hana, Amidamaru, he then goes on to say that brandishing your power only leads to useless wars, and useless wars only lead to more useless wars. And then he, quotes some, a sort of truism or aphorism that Yo apparently taught him, which is that if you bite something, it will bite you back. And so we get to see a little bit of Amidamaru's character development from Shaman King to Shaman King Flowers via his sort of relationship that he had with Yo in the previous series. And so what we see here is very interesting. One of the most interesting characters in all of fiction to me is the warrior philosopher. The warrior, of course, is, an interesting character, or an exciting character rather, because they could be badass. But I'm always interested in the way that warriors sort of analyze their own power and analyze the power of other warriors, and how they combine that power with some sort of, political ideology or some philosophy. And so I really like this characterization, or this sort of character development line that Takei's taken up with Amidamaru, because it shows that he's an experienced sort of, seasoned, warrior, but it also shows that he's had development, not just in terms of his capabilities as a warrior, but in terms of the way he can engage in self-reflection and sort of think about his own power, and to think about his warrior's ability. And this is very interesting to me also, because it reminds me of a book that I read by Joe Abercrombie, the First Law trilogy, and the first book is The Blade itself. And Joe Abercrombie gets that title from a quote. I forget where the quote is from, but it goes, the blade itself incites to deeds of violence. And in other words, this quote is about the sort of psychology of power. And it shows that, of course, humans are not ethically perfect. And so it raises the question of whether or not, whenever humans gain a certain amount of power and they have the ability to control or to dominate other people, it's a question about the temptation of power, and about whether or not humans will ever be, will ever have the capacity as ethical human beings to not engage in the sort of violence that one is able to engage in once they gain a certain amount of power. And so again, the blade itself incites to deeds of violence. The very fact that you have power is a sort of temptation that leads you towards, violence. And I think this is what Amidamaru is trying to warn Hana about. That, of course, you have the power to beat these people up, and you can continue to use your power in this way. But it eventually is going to raise all sorts of, interesting and sort of just very, very bad ethical dilemmas. And again, this could be sort of Takei laying the foundations for a more darker tone to this series, and to lay the foundations for a more darker or a darker protagonist rather. And so this is, the sort of setup for the conversation that Amidamaru is having with Hana. And then we get some really interesting insight into Hana's character through his response to Amidamaru. And basically, we learn that Hana is feeling empty because he can't use his power. And Tamao sort of acts as a check on his power. So we have a situation where Hana is an incredibly powerful shaman for his age, and he has the potential to be, vastly more powerful than Yo ever was. And yet there's no Shaman King fight, so he can't engage in, he can't use his power in that way. And on top of that, he can't use his power to, basically do anything else, because he has to have some sort of responsibility for the Asakura family, and he has some responsibility to look over the Asakura family until the next shaman fight. So basically, this is like giving someone a nuclear bomb, but then telling them that they can't use it during wartime. And so what we see here is that we see a sort of exploration of a mentality produced by having power but not being able to use it, and the sort of consequences that can come along, because Hana is a kid. He doesn't understand responsibility. He doesn't understand the importance of being prudent, and he's gung ho. He's hot headed. He's impulsive, and simply telling him that he shouldn't use his power isn't going to make him not want to use it. And so this sets up a situation where he could engage in all sorts of reckless behavior. It could become imprudent and could actually create some consequences that would some unethical consequences basically. And this sort of gets deeper into this sort of relationship between ethics and power. And this is why I think the relationship between Amidamaru and Hana, and the relationship between Tamao and Hana, is going to be problematic going forward. You 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 don't learn how to use your power in an ethically well. Let me say this. Let me backtrack a little bit and sort of explain that. This is sort of paradox of power, and the paradox of learning to use your power, which is this: you learn to use your power in an ethically responsible way by using your power. And of course, some people may say, well, no, that may not be true. You have to first think about how you want to use your power, and then you use your power. And I could understand why someone would believe that, but you don't learn ethics in a philosophy class. In other words, you learn how to be an ethically responsible person by living your life, by going through certain experiences. And it's only by understanding the consequences of your actions, by acting in a particular way, and then seeing what the consequences are, that you're able to reflect on how your actions produce these consequences in the first place. So even though, Amita Maru is trying to lecture Hana and Tamao is trying to lecture Hana, um, at some point Hana is going to have to act in the real world, and all the lectures that they're giving him are just not going to work for him. And so he has to be allowed to use his power and make mistakes and understand his mistakes, so that he can reflect on his mistakes, and then by reflecting on those mistakes become a more ethically responsible person. And I think that's what Amita Maru and Tamao don't really understand about Hana yet. And I think that this is going to eventually change as the story goes forward. But let me just speak about Yo versus Hana in terms of their characterization in their personality. The one of the key differences between Hana and Yo is that Yo always saw his powers as a burden rather than a gift. Of course, and he didn't really start to see his powers as 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 even being anything like a gift until late into the series of Shaman King. Probably not until the last couple of volumes. I mean, because Yo always, I mean, and we see this even in the Shaman King Zero prequel chapter. Yo always saw his powers as a burden rather than a gift. And as a result of that, it made him extremely reluctant to use his powers. So what happened was he could develop his personality without having to depend on his powers as a source of his identity. He could, think of other ways to develop his personality that didn't depend on him using his powers. He saw his powers as a burden, and that's why he was reluctant to use his powers. And so as a result, he could, explore other ways to come into his personality, which was why music was such an important symbol and such an important motif and aspect of his prequel chapter, rather than him using his power. And so what happens with Yo is that he doesn't really use his power unless he's forced to use his power. And he doesn't come to grips with the responsibility of power until he's actually forced to use his power. And the difference is that Hana, the difference with Yo between Yo and Hana is that Hana actually sees his power as, something that has incredible potential, something that is actually a gift, and something that, he should actually be allowed to use. And so what happens is, and I think part of the reason why he feels, well, not I think, actually, it's pretty clear that the reason why he feels so empty is because, one, he doesn't have a relationship with his father, and two, the only thing that he's good at, which is being a shaman. I won't say the only thing he's good at, but as far as we can see in this first chapter, one of the things that he's very, very good at, which is, being a shaman, he can't do. And so what happens is, since no one really understands what he's going through, it seems like he's using his power as a source of identity in a way that Yo never did. So after this conversation, we get introduced to the, I'm not sure if there will be the long running villains and antagonists of this series, but we get introduced to the characters who will either be, right now they're definitely antagonists, but it's not clear if they're villains or not. So we get introduced to some antagonists who are produced by a plot twist that just comes completely out of left field, and I would never have seen this coming. And it's related to how Asakura, apparently way back, the Asakura clan split up in two, and this was something I didn't even know, even though I read the first Shaman King series. Like I said, it was 3 years ago though. So way back, there was the Asakura clan, and apparently it split into two. One clan became, how Asakura's clan. The other one became the clan that Yo Asakura became the leader of. So what happens is, um, there's some grievances between how Asakura's descendants and Yo Asakura's descendants. And what happens is, how Asakura's descendants have now come back to exact revenge on the other Asakura clan. And so obviously that now includes taking revenge on, Hana Asakura. They now believe that, they're the real Asakura clan, and in order to, secure their spot as the real Asakuras, they have to basically wipe out Hana and, the Asakura clan that he's the leader of now. And this is a very, very interesting plot twist, and I absolutely love this plot twist. I never saw this coming, and it creates some very, very interesting possibilities for learning about the history and sort of the myth and the legend surrounding the Asakura clan. So I'm really, really excited about that. On one level, this is a sort of typical revenge plot, where some people who have been wronged in the past then come back and now they want to take revenge. So it works at that level. But on another level, this is a hell of a way to begin a sequel. first of all, it's a hell of a way to begin a manga, but this is a hell of a way to begin a sequel, to go from a sort of tournament style battle manga to a revenge story. And to do so in a way that keeps that transition very fluid. So I think that that again, Takei's, like I said, he's a master at this, at this manga craft. So the way he kept this incredibly fluid was very, very good, because it sort of picks up right where the conflict between Hal and Yo left off. So now it's sort of like the sins of the father are now being visited upon the son. So Hal's descendants and now Yo's descendants through his son are now sort of taking up that conflict that was sort of resolved, or sort of unresolved, at the end of Shaman King. And the other thing about this plot twist is that this could become some very, very fertile ground. Well, not could be, it will become very, very fertile ground for Hana's characterization and his character development. We already know that, Hana's is sort of strained by the absence of his father. But now, by forcing him to confront a past that his father had to confront with, how maybe Hana will now be able to sympathize with his father and sort of understand his father in a way that he would not have been able to had these antagonists from the Hao Asakura clan you know created this conflict with him. And so I think that this will become very fertile ground for teaching Hana Asakura about the relationship between ethics and power, and about how to use his power in a more ethically responsible way. So I think this was a very, very entertaining first chapter. It shows great potential and great promise, and I can't wait for the next chapter. And I'm sort of sad that these chapters only come out once a month, because now I gotta wait a month for the next one to come out. But like I said, very entertaining first chapter, shows great promise. Definitely excited about the next chapter. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.